I am deeply honored to deliver the 55th Convocation lecture of this great university. A university that was born not merely to award degrees, but to redefine the purpose of higher education in Africa. Permit me to express our appreciation to the Governing Council, Pro-Chancellor, the Senate, the Vice Chancellor, University Management, and other principal professors that are here with us. It is most fitting that today's lecture is titled Restoring the Dignity of Man. Enugu's want to be in human development and inclusive prosperity through experiential learning. I cannot imagine a more compelling thing. It speaks directly to the socio-economic imperatives of our age, when states are challenged not merely to pursue economic development, but to ensure human dignity, expand opportunity, equip citizens and with practical and competencies, and leaves no community behind. Every great university has a philosophy that transcends its physical structures. The University of Nigeria, Nsukka, gave itself an even more profound mission, which is as relevant today as it was at its founding: to restore the dignity of man. Those 6 works, chosen by Dr. Ndi Enugu as the guiding purpose of this university, answered one of the defining challenges of their time. Nigeria stood on the threshold of independence, emerging from colonial rule that have denied millions not only political freedom, but also the agency to realize their potential. Across Africa, a new generation was asking whether education could do more than produce graduates. Could it restore self-worth? Could it equip a people to think for themselves, shape their future, and take their rightful place in a world with confidence? That was the challenge into which this university was born. Today, 65 years later, we inhabit a different world, yet one that poses a similar question. Artificial intelligence, biotechnology, automation, climate change, demographic transformation, and the knowledge economy are shifting the foundations of prosperity. The wealth of nations is increasingly determined by what lies beneath their soil than by what has been cultivated within their citizens. Ingenuity, creativity, adaptability, and capability. What then does it mean to restore the dignity of man in 21st century? I submit that dignity must be measured not simply by political freedom or constitutional rights, indispensable though they remain. It must also be measured by the capability of every citizen to learn continuously, think critically, create boldly, innovate confidently, and contribute meaningfully to society. True dignity exists when people possess not merely the freedom to aspire, but the capability to transform aspiration into achievement, potential into productivity, and possibility into shared prosperity. This invites us to rethink development itself. Roads, buildings, industries, and public expenditure matter enormously, but they are means rather than ends. The true measure of development is the expansion of human capability, the capability to live a long and healthy life, acquire meaningful knowledge, participate productively in society, solve problems creatively, and improve the lives of others. This understanding resonates with Dr. Azikiwe's vision for what is the restoration of human dignity, if not the expansion of people's capability to live lives of purpose, contribution, and flourishing. The Human Development Index reflects this principle through three dimensions: a long and healthy life, access to knowledge, and a decent standard of living. The challenge before us is therefore not education, healthcare, infrastructure, industrialization, or economic transformation considered separately. It is human development in its full sense. Education develops capability. Healthcare protects it. Infrastructure connects it to opportunity. Industry converts it into productivity and enterprise. Strong institutions sustain it. Together, they form an architecture in which dignity can flourish. Education occupies a distinctive place because it is a catalyst through which every other investment acquires enduring values. Yet, education itself must evolve. In an age when artificial intelligence can retrieve information instantly and perform routine cognitive tasks, education can no longer be defined by the transmission of facts. It must cultivate curiosity, creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, character, and the confidence to solve problems not yet imagined. For this to happen, we require a different education philosophy. What has been called experiential learning. Experiential learning transforms knowledge into capability, enabling learners not merely to know the world, but to share it. That is why I speak today about Enugu's quantum leap in human development and inclusive prosperity through experiential learning, which brings us back to Dr. Azikiwe's enduring challenge. Have we restored the dignity of man? The honest answer is that we have made remarkable progress, but our work remains unfinished. Nigeria has produced world-class entrepreneurs, scholars, artists, scientists, and innovators. Millions of lives have been transformed through education. Across the Southeast, the spirit of enterprise, resilience, and self-determination remains one of our greatest strengths. These achievements testify to the extraordinary capability of our people. Yet, too many young people still leave university with qualifications, but without clear pathways to opportunity. Too many families invest everything in education only to discover that it ends with a certificate rather than productive participation. Too many communities continue to wrestle with insecurity, unemployment, inadequate healthcare, weak infrastructure, and the migration of talented people who no longer believe their future lies where they were born. For too many citizens, dignity remains an aspiration rather than a lived experience. Human development asks us to look beyond income and examine whether people live long and healthy lives, acquire meaningful knowledge, and possess the material conditions required to participate fully in society. Multi-dimensional poverty reminds us that deprivation is seldom only a shortage of income, poor learning, inadequate healthcare, insecure work, deficient housing, limited sanitation, weak connectivity, and exposure to shores reinforce one another. Poverty is really one problem at a time. Education reveals one of our most consequential deficits. The Enugu Academic Field Study of December 2023 confronted us with a crisis. Half of the assessed children could not read a single word in English after 4 years of schooling. More than half of primary 6 pupils could not solve basics of fraction, and the average teacher assessed read a primary 6 passage at only 107 correct words per minute. These are interconnected chains. Children outside school, children inside school without foundational learning. Inadequately supported teachers, dilapidated infrastructure, a rural-urban digital divide, exclusion of vulnerable learners, and insufficient data to show who was learning and when the system was failing. Beyond foundational learning stood a skills gap. Our institutions were not consistent in producing the technical, digital, entrepreneurial, creative, and transferable capability demanded by changing economy. Beyond the skills gap stood the activation gap. Even when knowledge and talent existed, too few systems connected them to opportunity. Learning did not reliably become livelihoods. Research did not consistently become innovation. Skills did not readily become enterprise. These deficits were reinforced by inadequate healthcare, unreliable electricity, weak connectivity, deteriorating roads, limited finance, low industrial capacity, and fragmented institutions. A sick child cannot learn effectively. A qualified graduate cannot build an enterprise without power, transport, capital, connectivity, and markets. A community cut off from infrastructure is also cut off from opportunity. This is not simply an economic challenge. It is a systemic one. Our people did not lack intelligence, talent, enterprise, and aspiration. The systems around them too often failed to convert potential into broadly shared prosperity. The Harvard question, therefore, is not whether we have made progress. It is whether we have transformed the conditions in which dignity can flourish, or whether we have mistaken progress for transformation. The scale of these deficits may tempt us to believe that the answer lies simply in more money, more schools, more hospitals, roads, programs, or policies. These investments matter. But investment alone does not guarantee transformation. A new school operating through obsolete pedagogy may expand enrollment without expanding learning. A hospital without trained personnel, medicines, power, referral systems, and accountable management may increase infrastructure without improving health. A skills program designed without industry may produce certificates without employability. The investment is real, but the transformation remains elusive. The first hidden source of the dysfunctional is the input fallacy. The assumption that more resources necessarily produce better human outcomes. Inputs are what government provides: money, buildings, equipment, personnel, and program. Outcomes are what citizens become able to do. Children read and reason. Patients receive effective care. Graduates create value. Farmers reach markets. Communities connect to opportunity. The distinction between provision and performance, as development scholars such as Douglas North and Peter Evans have shown, determine whether institutions convert investment into capability. More recently, Matt Andrews, Lan Pritchett, and Michael Woolcock have warned of capability traps, in which institutions adopt the visible form of successful systems, plans, agencies, laws, building, and reporting structures without acquiring the practical capacity to solve problems. They call this isomorphic mimicry, looking like a functioning institution without reliably producing its outcomes. The second is path dependence, which refers to the tendency of systems to continue along inherited trajectories long after their original assumptions have ceased to serve us. For instance, our political independence from colonialism changed the ownership of our institutions without transforming their underlying logic. We expanded education, governance, and healthcare as we knew them, but too rarely asked whether the assumption upon which they were built remained adequate to the future. The third inhibitor is sectoral fragmentation. Government is organized into ministries, but human beings do not experience life in sectors. The hungry child carries nutrition into the classroom. The graduate without electricity or connectivity carries infrastructure into the labor market. The rural community without a road is simultaneously excluded from healthcare, education, markets, and investments. And as the systems analyst, Dolela Meadows, has argued, individual projects may succeed while the larger system continues to fail because the parts do not operate as an integrated architecture for human capability. The fourth inhibitor is incrementalism. The belief that systems producing inadequate outcomes need only be somewhat larger, faster, or more efficient. Incremental improvements has its place, but when the framework itself is no longer equal to the problem, doing the same things better cannot produce a different future. It becomes the management of decline to break out of that circle a systemic transformation is needed. This is the context for understanding Enugu's pontoons leap. The pontoon leap is not a longer jump within the old development model. It is a different way of seeing, questioning, connecting, and acting. It is what I have called a disruptive innovation. And we're not going to do a deep dive on disruptive innovation because that is not the theme of this lecture. But elsewhere, we have also explained how disruptive innovation creates a new S-curve. When we started from a new S, from the era of ferment, and we begin to go into an era of explosion, and at a point we get to the plateau and it becomes flattened. We then need to innovate in order to disrupt that S that had served us optimally but no longer able to take us to the future. The history of science offers us a useful analogy. Quantum physics did not emerge by making Newtonian mechanics move faster. It began when scientists questioned whether the inherited framework could explain realities it had not been designed to see. Newtonian mechanics remained valuable within its domain, but a different order of reality required a different set of questions. So it is with development. We must ask, what assumptions informed the framework we inherited? Why do we measure government by what it builds rather than by what people become capable of doing? Why should a school be organized around memorization when the future demands creativity? Why should health, transport, power, education, industry, and tourism be planned as separate projects when citizens experience them as one life? Why should the limitations of yesterday determine the ambition of tomorrow? Quantum thinking questions the status quo at the level of its founding assumptions. It begins with the human outcome we see and designs backwards. It connects intervention that bureaucracy separates. It uses technology, evidence, and institutional learning to create new possibilities. It asks not merely, how can we improve what exists, but what should exist if we designed from purpose? This is not change for its own sake. It is disciplined, systemic, and disruptive innovation. It recognizes that a classroom connected to power, broadband, nutrition, healthcare, a prepared teacher, and an experiential curriculum is not merely a better classroom. It is a different developmental platform. A road linked to agriculture, industry, aviation, tourism, and markets is not merely a transport project. It is an economic network. Enugu's quantum leap is therefore a paradigm shift from projects to systems, from inputs to human outcomes, from inherited assumptions to purposeful design, from isolated circles Thank you. From isolated sectors to connected development, and from managing scarcity to activating possibility. But every paradigm shift begins in the imagination. Before we can build differently, we must first believe differently and confront the constraints that makes inherited limitations appear permanent, what we call the poverty of imagination. Every transformation begins before the first road is built, the first school opens, or the first policy is signed. It begins in the human imagination. Every invention, scientific breakthrough, institution, and movement that changed history first existed as an idea that refused to accept the world as it was. Before societies construct a different future, they must become capable of conceiving one. By poverty of imagination, I mean the inability of individuals, institutions, and societies to conceive, design, and build possibilities beyond inherited consequence. It is the condition in which yesterday's limitations become today's expectation and tomorrow's assumptions. When what has not yet been achieved is treated as what cannot be achieved, and when past experience becomes the boundary of public ambition, it is not poverty of intelligence, talent, determination, natural resources, or in the first instance, money. A people may possess extraordinary intelligence, entrepreneurial energy, cultural resilience, and immense potential, yet remain poor if they cannot organize these endowments into institutions that create knowledge, protect health, enable productivity, reward innovation, and extend opportunity. What we're saying is well established in scholarship. Amartya Sen teaches us development expands substantive freedom and capability. Anjan Apandura writes for the capacity to aspire, the culturally formed ability to envision desirable futures and navigate towards them, while Lofrera warns that historic limit situation becomes most powerful when people experience them, not as conditions that can be transformed, but as permanent boundaries. Those who repeatedly encounter opportunity develop richer maps of how possibilities can be pursued. Those shaped by persistent deprivation may have fewer opportunities to imagine and navigate alternative future. The future is built twice. First, in the imagination, and then in law, budgets, concrete, technology, and practice. If the first construction is staged, the second will be limited. Poverty of imagination begins when a condition becomes a conclusion. A dilapidated classroom is a condition. The belief that the rural children cannot receive world-class education is a conclusion. Inadequate electricity is a condition. The belief that industrialization must wait indefinitely is a conclusion. Poverty is a condition. The belief that it is permanent destiny of a people is a conclusion. Conditions can be transformed. Conclusions close the future before the war begins. Albert Hirschman possibility offers a disciplined alternative. Instead of listing every prerequisite a society lacks and declaring transformation impossible, it asks what combination of intelligence, institutions, incentives, leadership, technology, and collective action can overcome existing constraints. Poverty of imagination also reproduces inequality of aspiration. A privileged child encounters laboratories, mentors, networks, technology, travel, an example of success. A poor or rural child may possess equal intelligence, but fewer maps of the pathways connecting present circumstance to future possibilities. Democratizing opportunity, therefore, requires more than opening a school gate. It requires widening the child's map of the possible and supplying credible pathway to it. A poorly supported child performs badly, and the failure is attributed to the child rather than the school. A farmer works without power, storage, finance, technology, or markets, and is called unproductive. A graduate enters an economy without pathways connecting knowledge, industry, enterprise, and capital, and is accused of lacking initiative. Institutional failure is misrepresented as individual deficiency. Inhibited capability is mistaken for absent capability. Immanuel Kant, I'm sure our Lord Bishop was smiling because that's his space. I have just provoked his thoughts. Immanuel Kant described genius as an innate productive capacity, capable of producing what cannot be derived merely by following established rules. Society's responsibility is not to manufacture genius, but to create the conditions in which creativity can be discovered, cultivated, connected, and expressed. Genius may emerge in the village child, artisan, farmer, teacher, or young entrepreneur. The tragedy of underdevelopment is the contribution lost because those capabilities were never given room to flourish. The question before government is therefore not simply what can we provide for our people. It is also what might our people create if we remove the conditions that inhibit their genius. This separates imagination from fantasy. Fantasy desires an outcome without confronting what it requires. Developmental imagination identifies a possibility, studies the barriers, assembles capabilities and resources, designs institutions, and accepts responsibility for measurable results. It is disciplined possibility, moral in its inclusion, intellectual in its challenge to inherited assumptions, institutional in its translation into systems, and practical in its commitments to evidence and accountability. Development must transform the condition people have been forced to endure. This understanding is apt for the Igbo spirit, which has always been entrepreneurial, inventive, adaptive, and deeply egalitarian. The Igbo apprenticeship tradition combines learning by doing, mentorship, trust, disciplined practice, and access to lecturers. It moves the learner from observer to participant, and ultimately to an independent creator of opportunity for others. Our purpose here is not to romanticize the past, but to apply its deepest principle to the future. The transformation of latent potential into productive independence. This is why in Enugu we embrace experiential learning. Experiential learning, not as a foreign educational idea, but as a modern expression of our knowledge, tradition, and 21st century development imperative. Through experiential learning, we seek to democratize the conditions of possibility. Knowledge, technology, healthcare, infrastructure, mentorship, capital, connectivity, and opportunity should not be determined by birthplace, income, gender, status, or circumstance. Inclusive prosperity begins when the capacity to create value is widely developed and the opportunity to benefit from that value is broadly shared. And the center for experiential learning and innovation, what we refer to as selling. We express this through three connected concepts. The first one is latent impact. It identifies unrealized value within learners and communities. And the second is opportunity density. Identifies the needs to which those capabilities can be applied. And the third, the activation gap, identifies the missing connections between what people know and what societies enables them to do with that knowledge. These concepts inform our ongoing redesign of curricula, teacher development, TVET, industry partnership, and tertiary education. But imagination must be translated into choices, budgets, institutions, technology, infrastructure, and accountability. That translation from imagination to strategy to lived reality is the story of Enugu's quest. When I stood before the people of Enugu in 2023, I did not offer a larger version of the status quo, but incremental improvements. Instead, I asked them to believe in a different future. We committed ourselves to eradicate poverty, make Enugu the preferred destination for living, working, investing, business, tourism, and leisure, and grow our economy from approximately $4.4 billion to $30 billion in 8 years. Now, some believed ambitions of this scale belonged before a commission on lunacy. rather than in an election manifesto. But the greatest danger was never thinking too big. He was thinking too small. Before we laid a single kilometer of road or commissioned a project, we wrote a citizens' charter, a covenant making government accountable for the future we had promised. We committed ourselves to security, public trust, expanded opportunity, and investment where human development leverage could be achieved. This became the foundation of Enugu's 1-2-B. The deliberate acceleration of human development by removing multiple structural barriers simultaneously and building the integrated conditions through which capability can flourish. We would not treat schools, health facilities, roads, power, agriculture, industry, transport, and technology as isolated projects. Rather, we design them as connected platforms for human capability. Within this architecture, education occupies the center. For success, I'm sure it was encyclical in this way, the great lion and lionesses. For successive budget cycles, approximately 1/3 of the state budget had been devoted to education. Not simply to construct buildings, but to ensure that every child in every ward can access a school that prepares that child for the future, not the past. Our response is a network of 268 smart green school campuses, covering all our 260 political wards, approximately 7,000 classrooms, with interactive smart boards, 26,000 desktop computers, laboratories, digital libraries, innovation studios, clinics, smart farms, school meals, water, teacher accommodation, silver energy, and our basic Thank you. Our basic education, uniforms, and learning materials are free of charge. The purpose is to close the divides between rural and urban children, attendance and genuine learning, knowledge acquired and capability activated. The pathway continues through our smart senior secondary schools, model TVET colleges, and transformed tertiary institutions. At the heart of this education transformation is again STEM, the Center for Experiential Learning and Innovation, responsible for integrating curriculum, teacher development, research, digital literacy, skill intelligence, industry partnerships, and evidence. More than 23,000 teachers have undergone digital literacy development. And we have just recently approved a merit-based recruitment of 4,698 additional teachers for our smart-based schools. trophies and devices do not create learning. Their value depends upon teachers capable of awakening curiosity, guiding inquiry, and connecting knowledge to application. Across our technical and vocational education and training colleges, we have launched joint school enterprise training programs through which our technically inclined students are being trained in modern ICT industry knowledge at the Enugu Higher Factory, as well as in mechatronics, aquaponics, precision webbing, and fabrication and fashion and design. Beyond TDEX and senior secondary school, we are transforming our tertiary institutions, including the Enugu State University of Science and Technology, the State University of Medical and Applied Sciences, our health colleges, the Enugu State Polytechnic at Iwolo, and the State College of Education Technical, into institutions that connect knowledge to research, technology, enterprise, production, and public value. We're establishing a new state university of artificial intelligence and technology. A new state university of education and technology, and a new state university of agriculture, agro-industrialization, and technology. At INT, we have accredited new degree programs in automation, artificial intelligence, mechatronics, while enabling our ASU College of Medicine to rank top in national accreditation. Meanwhile, our State University of Medical and Applied Sciences at UNN demonstrates how teaching, research, innovation, and service can lead. Its recent international medical mission treated 3,150 patients and performed 804 surgical procedures within 2 weeks. NATO institution-based and national-sponsored research projects are underway. Our ambition has never been simply to educate children. It is to develop citizens who think critically, solve problems creatively, embrace technology confidently, act with character, and imagine possibilities beyond those they inherited. But government must be judged not by the scale of its projects, but by what those projects make possible in human lives. What does this architecture look like in the life of one child? What does a quantum shift in education look like? It begins when a child walks through the gates of a smart growing school. That child enters not a system designed simply to transfer information, but an environment designed to awaken curiosity, character, confidence, and capability. Learning extends from the classroom into the laboratory, library, farm, innovation studio, community, and the wider world. Children investigate real problems, test ideas, build solutions, learn from failure, and reflect upon what they discover. Permit me to illustrate what that journey can become. Recently, a young learner named Arinze Idoga from our Pilot Smart Grade School in the rural community of Owo stood before a room filled with students in Enugu City, not as a visitor or observer, but as their instructor. Constantly, he taught digital literacy, demonstrated practical ICT skills, responded to questions, and displayed the problem-solving habits he had developed through experiential learning. Only 2 years earlier, Arinze had entered one of our smart green schools in a community many might have assumed will remain at the margins of technological opportunity. Yet, they had acquired the competence and confidence to teach children who conventional thinking might have expected to teach him. For too long, we accepted that knowledge flows in one direction, from cities to villages, the privileged to the overlooked, those with opportunity to those without. But when we democratize quality education, knowledge moves in every direction. A rural school becomes a center of innovation. A village child becomes a teacher of urban peers. A community once regarded merely as a beneficiary becomes a contributor. In Arinze, you see more than a young boy using a computer. You see restored confidence, democratized opportunity, and a child once defined by geography becoming a creator of knowledge rather than merely a consumer of it. You see the dignity of man. Dr. Ndi Enugu understood that dignity is restored when education enables people to discover their worth and contribute meaningfully to society. Our responsibility is to extend that dignity to every child, in every community, no matter how remote. One child cannot prove system-wide transformation, but one child can reveal capabilities the inherited system failed to see and demonstrate what becomes possible when infrastructure, technology, pedagogy, mentorship, and opportunity are deliberately brought together. Arinze is not an anecdote offered in place of evidence. It's an early demonstration of the theory. Imagine what 2 years have produced in the life of one day. Then, imagine 10 years. Imagine Enugu when hundreds of thousands of children grow up believing not that they are waiting for opportunity to arrive, but that they possess the capability to create it. Imagine. That journey continues through secondary school, education, TVETs, and universities. Technical education must connect skills to industry, production, and enterprise. University education must open deep inquiry, collaboration, technology, and applied learning. Yet, financial hardship must not close the final gaze. And this is where I couldn't agree anymore with the Vice Chancellor on the impact of the President's initiative. So I acknowledge, just as he did, the consequential intervention of His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu GCFR through the Nigeria Education Loan Fund by providing interest-free support for Nigerian students. NEL Fund advances a principle we strongly support. Tertiary education must no longer remain the preserve of the wealthy or privileged few. I commend Mr. President for helping to democratize that opportunity. Thank you, Mr. President. No pathway should be considered inferior. The graduates, technician, artisan, agricultural innovator, software developer, nurse, teacher, engineer, creative professionals, and entrepreneur all create value. The responsibility of the system is to help every learner discover where individual capability can meet societal need. Our task is not simply to build better schools. It is to build a generation capable of imagining and creating a future worthy of the dignity that Dr. Azikiwe envisioned. But knowledge cannot become prosperity in a vacuum. Reimagined the journey of the child. We must build the world around that child's knowledge. Building new infrastructure may take months. Building a new culture takes much longer. The greatest threat to Enugu's quantum leap is the return of habits that produce the gold outcomes. Weak maintenance, low expectations, fragmented implementation, and the belief that public institutions belong to government rather than the people they serve. We must see every school, health center, road, power facility, farm estates, public asset, not as a gift from the government, but as a shared investment in our future. Government must provide standards, personnel, funding, data, and accountability. Communities must protect these investments and participate in their success. We must also resist judging every reform by its immediate return. The oil palm does not yield its richest fruits in the season it's planted. It first puts down goods before sustaining families for decades. So it is with human development. For a child entering a transformed Enugu Smart Green School today, the greatest return on that investment may become visible in the life and contribution of that child 20 years from now. This demands patience, but not complacency. We must measure results correct what is not working, train the people who operate our institutions, budget for maintenance, and build systems that survive changes of personnel and administration. The Golden League will endure only when reform becomes culture, performance becomes expectations, and public value becomes a shared responsibility. The capable child we have imagined cannot flourish in isolation. Education may awaken possibility, but healthcare protects it. Infrastructure connects it. Power activates it. Technology multiplies it. Industry applies it. And institutions sustain it. This is why Enugu's reforms are designed as one human development architecture rather than a collection of formulated projects. Across our 216 words, the principle that places a smart brain tool within reach of every child is also extending modern primary health care to families and farm estates to rural communities. We're strengthening healthcare because preventable illness must not destroy the capability education develops. Consider transport. Enugu Air is not simply an airline. It is an instrument of connectivity and economic geography. It connects our people to markets, investment, knowledge, tourism, and opportunity. Its ambition reaches beyond domestic travels. Stronger mates across the major cities of the world. And through this wider aviation network, Enugu becomes easier to connect. Enugu becomes easier to reach. Enugu becomes easier for businesses to come to. Universities, medical institutions, conference economy, and tourism assets become easier to engage. We're also reconnecting communities to schools, hospitals, farms, markets, industry through an expanding road network, 5 northern transport terminals, and cleaner public transportation and improving mobility, and connecting Enugu to the wider economy. Consider power. Historically, Enugu has received only about 60 megawatts of electricity from the grid. In the coming weeks, we're set to break ground on a 660 megawatts power generation project. 11 times above our historical supplies. This is not merely more electricity. It changes what becomes possible. Reliable healthcare, digital learning, industrial production, cold storage, technology, enterprise, research, hospitality are just. Power is not just one sector among many. It is an enabling platform for all of them. Consider healthcare. Across our world, primary healthcare is moving closer to families. At the tertiary level, the new 300-bed Enugu International Hospital is being developed as a 5-star center for advanced specialized care. And in few days, that will be again open to the world. We will provide gross medical service with top-notch professionals. We're also building the SUMAS Teaching Hospital into one of the best resource teaching hospitals in West Africa, connecting medical education, clinical practice, research, and service. This investment protects life while creating the skilled workforce and knowledge base for a medical economy. Consider conferencing and tourism. The Enugu International Conference Center gives the state a platform to host ideas, institutions, investors, professional communities, and global events. Our investments in hotels, waterfalls, caves, forests, lakes, cultural assets, and visitors' experiences are not decorative additions to development. Tourism is an ancillary ecosystem that supports aviation, transport, hospitality, agriculture, education, the creative economy, retail, and employment. These investments reinforce one another. Aviation brings the visitor, investor, scholars, or patients. A road connects a farmer to a market, a patient to a hospital, an entrepreneur to a customer. Reliable power supports a hospital, classroom, factory, hotel, and digital enterprise. Education and research provide the talents. Tourism and conferences create demand. Better health protects productivity. Skills connected to industry become livelihood. Enterprise converts these connections into jobs and value. This is the Enugu Human Development Model, seeing relationship where the core framework saw separate sectors and coordinating the conditions that enable people to learn, live, create, produce, and prosper. Its success will be measured not only by projects delivered, but by healthier lives, stronger learning, productive work, rising enterprise, and expanded opportunity. A society reveals its character by the pathways it creates for the rural child, the struggling family, the overlooked entrepreneur, the person living with disability, the every young citizen seeking a chance to contribute. Prosperity becomes inclusive when access does not depend upon birthplace, income, gender, status, or personal connection. That is the Enugu we're building. A society in which every citizen is recognized not merely as a beneficiary of development, but as a potential creator of value and a participant in our shared future. Permit me, as I conclude, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, permit me to ask you to look beyond the next project, budget, or election cycle. Imagine Enugu 20 years from now if we sustain investment in human capability. The child entering a smart brain school today will be an adult building companies, treating patients, designing technology, transforming agriculture, teaching, conducting research, or leading institutions. What we build around that child today will determine whether this knowledge remains a private achievement or becomes a shared prosperity. That future will not be created by government alone. Universities, must advance inquiry, invention, and public problem solving. The private sector must connect knowledge to enterprise and employment. Teachers must cultivate curiosity and character. Communities must protect public investments. Citizens must demand accountability. Government must remain disciplined, inclusive, and faithful to the nation. We often ask, what kind of society do we want to build? But should the more demanding question not be, what kind of people must we become to build that society? We must become a people unwilling to accept inherited limitations as permanent conditions, prepared to question, learn, create, collaborate, maintain, and improve, to build institutions stronger than personalities and opportunities broad enough to reach every community. The future is never built tomorrow. It is built in the decision we make today. Every thought we entertain, every standard we refuse to compromise, every child we encourage, every act of service we offer, every problem we choose to solve shapes the society our children will inherit. Nations do not transform by accident. They transform when ordinary citizens accept the responsibility for the future they desire. So let us refuse the poverty of imagination. Let us reject the quiet invitation to settle, wait, or believe that excellence belongs somewhere else. Let us measure leadership by the capability it develops in others, education by the lives learners become able to shape, and development by the dignity and opportunity it extends to every citizen. 65 years ago, Dr. Ndi Enugu gave this university a purpose: to restore the dignity of man. That purpose remains unfinished, but it is not beyond our reach. If 65 years from now, another generation gathers in these great universities and asks where we restored the dignity of man, may they answer not by reading our speeches or recalling our promises, but by living in the society we have the courage to imagine, the discipline to build, and the determination to leave behind. That is our doctrine. This is our script. And for us in Enugu, tomorrow is not coming. Our tomorrow is